Every human being operates a philosophy of life. Mental health has to do with your personal philosophy of life. It goes now back to what do I believe? A belief system.
Throughout the time that I grew up in Africa and all the things that I hear about my history, it is rare that somebody commits suicide.
Our identity was eroded through colonization, and that has led us with a colonial mentality and a colonial trauma. If you are going to trace suicide, that is the foundation. The foundation started when our individual identity, which is purely indigenous and is built on spirituality, was invaded by a materialistic educational system. Good morning, viewers across the globe. My name is Femi Esan. I'm the professor of Transpersonal Psychology and Education, the Vice Chancellor of Aaron University. And today we are looking at a very important topic that regards mental health with specific focus on suicide. And so, as you all know, that our university is one of the pioneers in the area of transpersonal mental health. We'll be looking at transpersonal mental health approach to suicide. Under the subtopic, vision, the solution to suicide. We believe that vision is the solution to suicide. So let us introduce the concept of transpersonal mental health. What is transpersonal mental health? It's a holistic approach to mental health that integrates a person's spiritual or transcendent experiences into modern psychology. It views the spirit or soul as a vital part of a person's well-being, in addition to the body and the mind. This therapy helps individuals explore their spiritual side, finding meaning and work towards a personal growth by focusing on experiences beyond the ego, such as identity, purpose, and spiritual evolution. What this simply means that your true essence and true resource for your mental health is built on your spiritual health. And we believe that spiritual health is the foundation for sound mental health. This philosophy approaches mental health from building spiritual resilience through spiritual resources. We believe that transpersonal mental health is also core approach to the issue of mental and emotional issues. It can be used to solve, not just to eliminate the symptom, but to solve the root cause of depression, addiction, and phobias. Also, it's a very powerful approach to answer the existential questions. It is helpful for individuals seeking to find meaning, a personal sense of meaning in their lives, and whereby people are struggling with their identity. So, transpersonal mental health has provided a framework for us to answer existential questions. Also, for personal development, transpersonal mental health becomes a framework for individuals to engage in psycho-spiritual growth with special focus on development that is beyond the natural self. It is an holistic approach to the question of personal development, which enables an individual to integrate their spiritual growth as part of their psychological and biological growth. Suicide, one of the greatest cause of death in the modern time. Suicide is a death caused by self-inflicted injury with the intent to die. Suicide doesn't always have clear warning sign. It can happen suddenly without any indication that something was wrong. There's also what we call suicide ideation, that is suicide thought. People always fighting a persistent battle with the thought of death bombarding their mind. In the UK, the figure shows that an average just under 6,000 people take their own lives every year. Three-quarters of these people are men. It is very serious. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 50. It raises a question: where is the origin of suicide thought? This is a profound question when we are looking at the fundamental root cause of suicide. It starts with thought. Don't forget that mental health is defined as anything that affects the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. So the question that is fundamental to us in transpersonal approach is, where is the origin of thought? We all know that thought can come from stimuli from the environment. However, there is more beyond that. That is, there is a transpersonal dimension to the origin of thought. Thought is not only originating from the stimuli, from the environment, through our normal sense organ. We in the transpersonal movement, we can establish the fact that thought also has spiritual origin. So when it comes to suicide is not just only thought that is initiated by stimuli from your physical environment due to circumstances that are beyond your control. There's also a spiritual side to thought. We have to look at the origin of thought and looking at suicide from an holistic perspective. What are the root causes of suicide? Now, suicidal thoughts have many causes. Most often, suicidal thoughts are the result of feeling like you can't cope when you are faced with what seems to be an overwhelming life situation. If you don't have hope for the future, you may mistakenly think suicide is a solution. Now, a key root cause of suicide is hopelessness. Hopelessness. That is very profound. Hopelessness. How do we engage hopelessness? How do you solve hopelessness? What gives you hope in life? Can medication give you hope? Can talking to a therapist give you hope? If suicide root cause is hopelessness, you cannot look at hopelessness from a philosophical point of view. What is your ideal of hope? What is your belief system that leads to you having hope in life? This is where the transpersonal approach comes in, because there is no medication from the biological model of psychiatric medicine that can give you hope, or just talking to a therapist to give you hope. So what is the origin of hope? You will see that in today's lecture, we started from the very thesis that vision to suicide. Then you ask the question, where is the origin of vision? Where does vision come from? Ladies and gentlemen, vision is purely spiritual. We explore that further in this very discourse today. If you look at man, what is man? Man is a tripartite being. Now, this is the foundation of the framework that we use in transpersonal approach to suicide and depression. Now, based on this tripartite nature of man, man is defined as a spirit. He has a soul. He lives in a body. So when you look at this ontological foundation of what is the essential nature of man, man is a tripartite being that exists in three dimensions of reality. This diagram shows us the essential nature of man, called the tripartite approach, which is the fundamental structural framework for transpersonal mental health intervention. What does it say? This is the essential nature of man. Man is a tripartite being, meaning that man is a spirit, he has a soul, he lives in a body. Looking at this diagram, how do we approach suicide from this diagram? Now, suicide starts with a thought, yes. Again, you look at origin of thought. Thought can come from the stimuli from your natural environment, from the ecosystem, through your senses. So as you have physical senses, we must also have spiritual senses, because man is a spirit, meaning that thought can also originate or be initiated from the spiritual realm. Now, when it comes to the issue of death, which is a very powerful, strong thought, when an individual has a persistent suicide ideation that is consistent and persistent, there is a spiritual aspect of that thought. It's coming from actually a spirit. So spiritual thought coming from the realm of the spirit, it's coming. So the individual must be able to develop their spiritual health, to be able to have spiritual resources to counter, or what I would say, to be able to withstand and bring into captivity, to control this thought of death that is coming. Now, that is what spiritual development comes in now. You have to be able to develop spiritual resources leading to spiritual resilience. So, I mean, there are many warning signs of suicide, thinking openly about suicide, mood changing, not finding joy, sudden calmness, reckless behavior. Some people go as far as writing suicide thought in the note that they want to die. All these are symptoms, signs that someone is dealing with suicide ideation. Yeah. And so you have to watch out for this. This is very important. When you see those signs, the individual needs to seek help, and people around them also need support. Now, coming to Africa, what is the suicide rate in Africa? Globally, someone dies by suicide every 40 seconds. That is the sad reality. Globally, someone dies by suicide every 40 seconds, totaling about 700,000 deaths annually. In Africa, the rate is 11 per 100,000 people, compared to the global average of 9. African men are at a particular risk with 18 suicides per 100,000. This is significantly higher than the global male average. This is quite very sad. African men have the highest rate of suicide around the world. And according to the World Health Organization, 87.5 people per 100,000 of the population take their own lives every year in Lesotho alone. Where we have one of the highest rate of suicide, Lesotho, Eswatini, South Africa, the southern part of Africa, which we're going to look at this, today in this discourse. Why is that rampant? Why is suicide concentrated in that part of Africa, the southern part of Africa? Why are they experiencing that? There must be certain socio-cultural and economic factor that is contributing to that. Now, by contrast, that is more than double the following country on the list, which is Guyana in the South America, where the figure is just more than 40. Now, it's almost on 10 times the global average, which stands at 9 suicides per 100,000 people. In other words, African men have the highest rate of suicide globally, which is a sad reality, and it's one of the we have the highest rate of suicide among the African men. African men are taking their life. What is really happening? We are going to discuss that after this short lecture. So, like I said earlier on, that we believe in transpersonal movement, that suicide has a spiritual origin and both physical origin. So when suicide becomes persistent, like suicide ideation, that is a persistent bombardment of someone's mind with the thought of death, we strongly believe that there's a spirit called the spirit of death in transpersonal philosophy. This is a demonic spirit, and it causes premature death. And this spirit of death can hang over an individual. And it tends to come when someone goes through a traumatic experience that opens the door for that, especially a prolonged illness or towards terminal death. So people begin to fear. It becomes a torment, and it becomes what we call a stronghold that captivates the mind of that individual, where they cannot control. It's like they were overwhelmed. There's a cloud over them by this spirit of death, and it's constantly bombarding their mind with the spirit of death. And then after a while, they start believing it. Therefore, we need an holistic approach, not just therapy, not just only therapy, not just medication to the medical model. You have to deal with the spirit of death, and that is the transpersonal approach, dealing with the spirit of death. How do you handle that spirit of death? That is one thing we are going to explore in today's class. Again, when we look at the philosophical approach to suicide, what makes a man, an individual, to wake up in the morning and to take their life is because we believe that a life without purpose is meaningless. So the very philosophical aspect of life with purpose, what is life itself? Does life have a meaning? Now, these are the existential questions that we answer in transpersonal mental health approach. It becomes a framework that helps an individual to find a personal sense of meaning and purpose in life. These are based on the psychospiritual philosophy of what we call the pre-existence theory that goes back to before the creation of man and the entrance of the spirit of man in the womb of his mother. That is, in the pre-existence, that the man has been in existence before the foundation of time. A man has a purpose. Right there in the pre-existent philosophy, you have been given a purpose. Now, these are the psychoeducation approach that we use in transpersonal mental health. So when people come to engage in transpersonal mental health, we take them through psychoeducation that establish philosophical understanding that life does not begin from the day you are born. You have been in existence before you manifest. And so therefore, an higher power has sent you to this planet for a purpose. And that is very foundational to the solution of suicide. Men must know they are born with a purpose. They are here based on purpose. And that discovery of that purpose is what gives life a meaning. And that's the reason why your life is worthwhile, your life is valuable to humanity. When you have this understanding, it leads to a vision. And therefore, you stop taking your life because you know you are here on a mission, on a purpose, and the world needs you. You are very valuable to humanity. That's why it is very important to find a sense of personal purpose and meaning in life. Spiritual purpose is not connected to anything materialistic. Let's settle that one. Spiritual purpose is purely a spiritual discovery of your spiritual identity, understanding that your spiritual life began before the beginning of time. You were sent to this planet by a higher power called God for a purpose, to fulfill a purpose. And you have to find this spiritual purpose by developing your spiritual life. And that is the beauty of transpersonal mental health approach. It gives you the ability to discover yourself. It teaches you the principles to build your spiritual health. That has something to do with materialistic or any kind of material achievement, because your spirit man, you are here on this planet to fulfill purpose. And how do we do that? We have a framework that we use in our Transpersonal Mental Health Clinic called the 5 questions of life. We believe that these 5 questions are the most important questions if an individual is finding a sense of purpose. Number 1, who am I? That is a question of identity. Number 2, where did I come from? That is your eternal origin. See that? I just said a few minutes ago, the eternal origin began from the foundation in what we call in the philosophy of pre-existence. That is, you are being in existence before you manifest in your mother's womb. That is fundamental to discover your identity. Then why am I here? The question of purpose again. That is, an higher power, the origin of life itself, have sent you here on a purpose. Life has an origin. We believe in creationism as a foundational approach to our mental health framework here. Your life must have a beginning. There is a source of life called ultimate reality. Now we see again, what can I do? It's talking about your potential. That means that when an individual discovers their personal purpose, they also discover their potential to fulfill that purpose. That discovery of your potential tells you that your value system and your sense of self-worth is attached to your potential. You are a valuable individual, so you cannot afford to take your life because you are valuable with potential to fulfill your potential. And lastly, the question about where am I going in life? This is where you have a personal sense of vision. You see that? A personal sense of vision. And that vision really helps you to now navigate your life by planning, having a concrete plan on how to attain that vision. So you turn that vision into goals. Now, this 5 question is what we use as a framework in helping our client to find a sense of meaning and personal purpose in life. Thank you for your time. So we end up with this very, very philosophical saying, which says, where there is no vision, the people perish. This is a philosophy from the Torah that clearly states that when there is no vision, people tend to live recklessly, whether it's communal, leadership, individual. A vision becomes the best plan. So when we go to the first question, we know that the root cause of suicide is hopelessness. What gives hope in life is a vision. That vision goes beyond your immediate situation. It goes beyond the limitation of your environment. When you see a vision, which becomes a spiritual side, you are able to plan. Then you are not frustrated by the limitation of today. You are using your time right now to prepare for that vision. That will back up in your spirit. And that's why we say to be able to have an intervention to eliminate the symptoms of suicide, a man must discover a vision based on their purpose. Discovery of vision, which is purely spiritual experience, and it's a transpersonal experience. That discovery of vision is what brought hope, and hope is the solution to suicide. Thank you. Therefore, vision becomes the solution to suicide. We need vision for African men.
I want to thank you so much, Professor Oluwafemi, for this important lecture. You see, you'll be giving us a lecture since the very first time that we have met, and we'll be engaging people in this important conversation. We have talked about a lot of things, looking at, in fact, one of the most viewed video on our YouTube channel is a topic that we're dealing with Ifa theology. And I believe that we're going to come back to that conversation also in a later date, because there are things that some people believe that it is clear, but it's not clear. There is a lot of things that people need to understand about who we are. about our identity, about the challenges that we have. Of course, today we're talking about mental health and also suicide, which has become a pandemic in different parts of the world. In fact, I didn't even know that there was this high rate of suicide among Africans and among people in Africa, to be precisely. Of course, we're going to have time to go through that just now. And I want to say again, thank you so much for taking your time from your busy schedule to respond to some of the questions that we have here related to suicide and why people even commit suicide and all of that. So the first question I have for you, Professor Oluwafemi, is you talk about existential question. And I think that is fundamentally important for people that are listening to us. What should people know about that existential question? What does that mean in terms of what we are talking about today, which is suicide?
Yes. Thank you, Brother Obi. So when you look at existential question is talking about fundamental is what is life? We're talking about existence, the question of existence, and so the fundamental question is what begins this life, the origin of existence, and so it takes us to the question of ontology. So, what is the source of existence? Questions about why am I here? Why did I exist? Right. So, you are talking about existential questions. Where is the origin of existence? Does existence have a source? If it has a source, why am I in existence? So these are questions that you need to answer. And if you look at the 5 questions model that we use in our clinic here, we use those questions to help individuals to look into their own philosophical belief system. Don't forget that mental health has to do with whatsoever affect the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. So whatsoever affect the way you think is coming from your belief system. So every human being operates a belief system. So in transpersonal mental health approach, transpersonal cognitive behavioral approach, to look at this individual belief system about existential question. This is what is themselves checking their own belief system about their true source of their identity. So it is purely philosophical and spiritual existential question that we use. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That is very important to have a kind of a basis for the conversation that we are having today, because somebody need to respond to that, those existential questions, because they come around and around all the time. And another curiosity that I have is that in most of the conversation that we have had, we have had a lot of it. That sometimes you have referred, particularly when you are looking at the issue related to mental health and suicide, and you often will say that the United Kingdom, which is where you live, is the suicide capital of Europe. And for many people, that might sound very challenging to understand, because many people think that the European, okay, let's say the United Kingdom, because of what the kind of image they present to the world, they should have everything. They have everything, so they should be happy with life. They should have all the response to. They should have the response to all the questions that we are asking here, so that they shouldn't come to the point of deciding to take their life, because you come to take your life because you believe that you are worthless. You believe that you are not relevant. You believe that you are not useful. So that actually that is what they are saying here. Because if you believe that you are useful, you don't throw away what is useful, no? You only throw away what is useless. So you come to look at your life as useless. Therefore, you can climb the bridge and jump down because you are not relevant. So looking at it from that perspective, looking at it from the fact that somebody get to the point of believing that he or she is useless, therefore you waste your life. Then you look at this taking place in the United Kingdom of all. Then somebody need to ask the question: are we getting something wrong here? How come people are getting into that point? What is really going on here? So that is what I would like you to respond, because you are in the United Kingdom. You see what we are talking about. In fact, you have a clinic entirely dedicated to this topic, which is mental health, and you talk about suicide also, which means it is pretty relevant to where you are. So help us clarify that part.
Okay, so let me start by the prediction of the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization predicted that by 2030, the number one health issue in the whole world will be depression, in both developed world and developing world. He said depression will be the number one health issue. That the pandemic that we are going to face now is going to be depression. And this depression does not respect your economic status. Okay? Now, that leaves us to a question. If a rich man is becoming depressed and a poor man in the third world is becoming depressed, it tells you that economic status or social welfare or environmental condition does not guarantee immunization from depression. That tells you that there is more to depression than material comfort. The problem here with mental health, as you know, sir, every human being operates a philosophy of life. Mental health has to do with your personal philosophy of life. It goes now back to, what do I believe? A belief system. Now, we know that most people in Europe, they operate a belief system that is based on materialism. Okay? And that is the hegemony of the educational philosophy of the Western nation. Is built on materialism. That materialistic approach to life has led to people defining themselves by materialistic self-worth. And so when you define yourself, and all you know is that you are a body and soul, your spiritual existence is excluded. So you operate a philosophy based on hedonism, the maximization of pleasure. And what happened? It leads to frustration. Because life is not only in the material. In fact, material reality is a shadow. The true reality of life is a spiritual existence. And that's why we are talking about transpersonal approach to life. That is what is missing. It all begins with your self-definition. However, the dominant hegemony belief system of people's definition of self is the material self, the embodied self. And when you operate in that dimension of philosophy, all you see is your physical body. All you see is your material life. You will be frustrated. When those things begin to lose value, frustration will come in.
All right. Thank you for that clarification too. So we're going to do a kind of a direct comparison in this case now. A direct comparison in the sense that we have looked at the European understanding of life, which is materialism, or the ontology of materialism, which is the basis of everything that must be, that is, and that will always be, okay? Now, because we are Africans, we are not European, we have a different understanding of life. And I'm standing on the basis of my culture, which is that you are never seen just because of what you possess, what you have. You are seen from relationship, which is what you are in relation to other people. And of course, this is not happening only in my culture, which is Esan, south of Nigeria. This is basically universal all across Africa. But I even want to say that if you go to other Asian society, apart from this modern European society, it is true everywhere. If you go to the Native America, that is the same belief that they have. Either we live in relationship, because if we are living in a relationship, it is difficult for you to decide on your own that this is just me. It is not just you. Whatever you decide must reverberate around where you are. By this understanding, throughout the time that I grew up in Africa and all the things that I hear about my history, it is rare that somebody commits suicide. Because it is not about you. Your existence is not just about you. You are existing in relationship with land, with air, with water, with the birds, with the animal, with everything. Therefore, how dare you decide to just put an end to it? Because it is not about you. Okay, because I am looking at it from the point of view, from the lens of an Esan person, you are not an Esan person. Could you clarify for me if what I'm saying is wrong or is strange to you? You that is a Yoruba person.
No, it's not strange. Don't forget, you mentioned, you talk about Native Americans. You are talking about indigenous knowledge system, okay? You are talking about the indigenous knowledge system from the indigenous nations of the world, okay? So you are from an indigenous ancestral land, Asian people from the south part of Nigeria. Now, every indigenous nation have what we call their indigenous knowledge system. Okay, they have what their indigenous knowledge system. Now, this indigenous knowledge system is also have their indigenous psychology, because you have to understand that psychology is cultural bound. You cannot look at people's psychology from Eurocentric approach. Each people have their own indigenous knowledge system that has fed into their indigenous psychology. Now, that indigenous knowledge system has values and also belief system. What we found out that globally, indigenous knowledge system is based on spiritual ontology. You see that? Because that spiritual ontology has led to a value system that sees each individual as become interconnected. And how are you connected? You are connected spiritually. That's what's called transpersonal ecology. You are connected spiritually. So you don't see yourself as individualistic as we see in the Western world. Okay? You see yourself as part of this connection, part of universal essence. So that is why you understand that I'm part of you. You are part of me. How do we come together? Spiritually, we are from the same source. That is where that mindset is coming from. It's coming from your indigenous knowledge system. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. In fact, that is why we actually inculcated it in the topic that we were going to have here in Verona. We're still going to have it where you will be here to talk about indigenous knowledge system. Because I think people in Europe need this understanding too. Because we are not going to be telling the people in Europe, come and embrace Africa. No, we are saying embrace who you are. It's part of you too. Because we are human beings. There is a thing that connects all of us together. That thing that connects us together is not just at the university. It is even for those who didn't go to university. As long as you are a human being, you are connected. All right.
Yes.
Now, we have talked about this differences, this dichotomy now that we have, looking at European way of life and the consequence, looking at the African way of life. But even in Africa now, according to the data that you share with us, there is a high percentage of suicide among African people. You made mention of the men be the highest in these statistics. Could you explain to us, because we are in Africa and now we are having this high number. What is going on here?
Yes, we have to. Thank you for this question and for the opportunity to explore this very important topic. We have to go back to the origin, okay? The origin. So where did this problem started from? Now, we are going to go back to the pre-colonial era. In the pre-colonial era, our indigenous knowledge system is built on ontology of spirituality, okay? In the pre-colonial era, the African indigenous knowledge system is built on ontology of spirituality. So we have a spiritual epistemology. That is, we believe that knowledge originates from the spirit. This spiritual ontology also forms the basis of our indigenous psychology. So our psyche, our understanding, our identity is built on spirituality. So then what happened? Our lands were invaded by the colonial master, and they invaded our intellectual consciousness with a materialistic educational system. Have you seen the problem? That has led to the beginning of the colonial trauma, whereby we feel inferior to our indigenous layer system. So we lost our identity. Our identity was eroded through colonization. And that has led us with a colonial mentality and a colonial trauma. If you are going to trace suicide, that is the foundation. The foundation started when our individual identity, which is purely indigenous and is built on spirituality, was invaded by a materialistic educational system. What happened to an African person? An African person lost their identity and their sense of self was disrupted. We now embrace a materialistic dominant view of self. Therefore, materialism kept into the fabric of our system and our psyche. That is the foundation of the problem.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, I know this can really go into different ways, different dimensions, the conversation. because you see, many Euro-Western, let's put it like that, because there are other people that are not necessarily in Europe, but are offspring of European philosophy, offspring of European way of life, like the people who that like the white people in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, they all are governed by the same principle. The approach are the same everywhere. So these people, we say, where we bring civilization to the world, we enlighten the world and the rest. Of course, we're not going to deny that. But one of the
Yeah.
problems that I see among this philosophy, this understanding, is that they have been very limited in their perspective, in their understanding, of life, even though based on they use the gun to be able to violate people, but they are able to study to understand people. Therefore, you should build a holistic human experience where everybody look at Europe and say we are all progressively moving. But what we see, looking at the European understanding of life, is that we will consume this world for the interest of Europe. So that I can go to any part of the world, I can kill the people and bring whatever I can get there to bring it to develop France, to develop Germany, to develop the United Kingdom. This is a barbaric way of looking at life. If your civilization is a good one, it should lead to human development. Not only human development in Europe, it should lead to the general human development so that everybody will come to appreciate you. Not people in Africa condemning you all the time because you are exploiting them. Those in the Native America are condemning you because you kill their people. Those in Australia are condemning you because you exploit their people. This is not a good model of life. And of course, we can also see the evidence there because you are also dying, I am also dying. It shouldn't be like this. This is not a good way of living. So this is what I just wanted to clarify, that when some people think that, okay, we brought development, yes, that is a good thing that the European brought to the human collective existence. But it needs to be balanced in the sense that Europe should live a good life, not because they want to exploit other people. Because if you look at the model of development that we have today, if Africa stop supplying Europe, Europe become poor, which is to say it's falsehood. It's built on falsehood. It's not built on, I can take what I have with me and grow. Any person that want to copy can also copy from me because I am self-sufficient. The European philosophy doesn't build a self-sufficient. Their model of development is not self-sufficiency, because if it were self-sufficiency, Europe should be able to live on its own. But currently, European understanding development is not able to sustain itself. It want to be able to exploit other people for them to be. And therefore, there is a lot of falsehood here. And probably this is what is leading to the people having a lot of money, but jumping down from the tree, taking poison to die. Because there is an incoherence here. I don't know if I'm overstressing. That is, what you are saying is different from what you are doing. That is what they call cognitive dissonance.
Yes. Now, why you are saying that is the fact that the colonial master came with the philosophy of materialism, which leads to exploitation and accumulation of material wealth. Again, if you look at that mindset, is coming from a materialistic point of view. So it is not holistic. Now, an holistic mindset will lead to development in every facet of life. You see that? But when I come with a dominant mindset of materialism, all I'm after is your material exploitation and material gain. Now, what that leaves us in the former colony is a depletion of our natural resources and also a depletion and erosion of our spiritual resources. So the average African individual lost faith in their indigenous belief system. Therefore, they are now embarked on the game of materialism, which the colonial master, you cannot beat them at that game. I'm sorry.
That is so true. We need to understand that. That is so good. That is a good point. Now, you also made mention of Southern Africa having the highest percentage in this suicide scale, as it were. Is there any reason to that? Is it just a coincidence?
Yes. when you look at the Southern Africa, you will now discover that the rate of suicide is tied to economic factor. You see that? That's why when you look at suicide, we are not looking at it just from the spiritual aspect. You are having an holistic approach. In fact, in our mental health clinic in our university, we developed a model called the biopsychosocial spiritual model of mental health. You are looking at the bio, the psycho, the social, and the spiritual. So these combinations are what has led to the increase. And when you look at one of the fundamental factor is the social and the economic factor in that southern part. You look at poverty rate. Yes. You cannot tackle suicide in the southern part of Africa without engaging in economic empowerment. That's it. It is not just the spiritual. Even if you have spiritual intervention, without entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, that suicide rate will continue. Because when people are jobless and they are idle, they got nothing productive. And a man's definition of self-esteem is attached to his job. That's what we need to address in southern part of Africa.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you. I appreciate also the time that you spend here educating us about this important topic, mental health, where you look at the transpersonal approach to mental health and suicide. So for the people that are listening to this point, of course, I encourage you to leave your comment. Let us know what you are taking away from this conversation. Professor Oluwafemi is here to respond to your comment. And of course, he's available to be able to answer your question if you have anyone. So Professor Oluwafemi, what would be the final thought here? Maybe this is a key message you want to leave the people with. What would that be?
Yeah, to my African people in the southern part of Africa, we need an holistic approach to mental health, starting with the material side first, even before we go to the spiritual. The material side, we have to empower the people. The government must embark in economic empowerment of the young adult, the youth. How? Building a curriculum on entrepreneurship. Okay? And then we now go back to the spiritual intervention of mental health. But because if you cure mental health spiritually and there is no empowerment to economic empowerment, it is not holistic. We need both. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do. So thank you all of you thanks to all of you too who have listened to the end of this conversation. We ask you again, if you have any thought, any intuition, or any inspiration based on what you have learned here, based on what you have heard Professor Oluwafemi said, we encourage you to leave the thought here and share also this video with other people who you believe can benefit from it, because our role here is to be able to bring this knowledge to everybody so that it can be helpful to the right people who are looking for the right information. And of course, we are going to be here again at Obehi Ewanfoh, and I'm going to be here bringing in important people like Professor Oluwafemi to share with you, to help you understand how to live a better life. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.